Okay, unless somebody else hasn't already, why don't we start with each of you speaking just a little bit about your expertise so that they kind of know what to ask you questions about. What have you been involved with? What do you think, how we can connect with our audience here so that they know what questions to ask you? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Tim Higgins, and I'm interested in learning. When I was looking at Dr. Deming's work, a whole bunch of people were telling me it's all about statistics and understanding numbers. What I discovered is it's all about learning. You don't even know what numbers to look at unless you have an idea what you're trying to learn. That's me. I don't know what else you need to know.
Who were the companies that you worked for?
Let's see. I taught school for 8 years. I worked for Rocketdyne for 29 years. And I've been working for NASA at Rocketdyne for the last 15.
Hello, I'm Frans Leijse from the Netherlands. My background is really in the pharmaceutical industry, and as a consultant to help to validate computer systems, which is a requirement by FDA. And the people who are ultimately responsible for signing off on production batches are pharmacists. They're not the pharmacists in the high street, but they are industrial pharmacists, and they are personally accountable for signing off. And, am I losing the signal? Lori?
Where's the hotspot?
Let's see.
Not the meeting.
You're freezing. Freezing.
Okay, Jamie says just go ahead. They're having a rich conversation, so they'll continue without us.
Someone else have a phone? My phone's on a hotspot.
So we're going to continue without them.
You want the phone charge?
Go to charger bill?
Someone's phone charger or?
No, we're just going to continue.
I'm always interested.
Thank you so much. So, apologies for interrupting your introduction.
I'm trying to.
So, can I continue?
Yes, please.
So I was saying, I'm well versed in the pharmaceutical industry, working for big pharma like Novartis and GSK, and helping companies to validate computer systems, which is a requirement by FDA. And the person who is ultimately responsible for signing off on production batches are pharmacists. They're not the pharmacists that you would find in the high street, but they are industrial pharmacists who have a solid background in production systems and so forth. The only thing lacking in their curriculum is an IT component. That's where I come in. So, computer systems are systems, and what they have a purpose, and this is where I can help the pharmacist with Deming's ideas to understand that the company is a system, but also a computer system is a system. And both have purposes and they need to work together to deliver the results that are required. So that's kind of my background, and I'm always curious about new developments in the world, and particularly also that's why we come here to these sessions to learn and exchange ideas and maybe get some more examples that I can use in practice. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
Oh, it's good to see you. I want to invite those of you who are on that half of the room, if you can't hear, bring a chair and come up closer so that you can hear. Okay, just want to check because I was having trouble hearing that guy right here. So.
I'm right here and I can't hear, but that's a different thing.
All right.
Hi, I'm Ian Bradbury. I'm a recovering statistician. If you don't know what a statistician is, that's a person who has the mathematical aptitude to be an accountant, but they lack a personality. I have a Ph.D. in statistics. My working life started out teaching statistics at the University of Texas, Dallas for a year, and then Oakland University and Rochester, Michigan. The job in Oakland was particularly appealing to me because they had an applied industrial statistics program, which is very, very unusual. And half my teaching load was on site at both either Ford or GM, where they had on-site master's degree programs in applied statistics. So I had the very good fortune there. Both organizations were in the midst of trying to apply Deming philosophy. That was part of why they had actually initiated those on-site programs and kind of developing the internal improvement organization capability. So I got to interact with all sorts of people who knew a lot about Dr. Deming, and at GM Powertrain, where I met Mike, where we ended up working together. I was told that, well, if I was going to be teaching statistics classes to all these folks at GM, then I needed to go to a Deming 4-day seminar. I'd already had plenty of kind of off-the-side conversations about it, and also like in-class challenges to what it was I was teaching. So my first Deming 4-day seminar was sat at the facilitator table with Gypsy Rainey, with her just like working me over for the duration of the 4-day seminar. So that was my introduction, and it was kind of a slippery slope from there. So ended up being hired by GM. Worked in the powertrain engineering organization on trying to apply Deming's ideas in the engine engineering area, and jointly leading the powertrain statistical network with Mike and another Mike. So we had the privilege of helping to facilitate Deming 4-day seminars, traveling with Dr. Deming internally. We developed the Deming 4-day seminar on videotape for internal use for when Dr. Deming passed away. I was given the job of asking Dr. Deming about what we were supposed to do after he was no longer around and available to do 4-day seminars, which I was incredibly nervous about. And he basically just said, well, you better be very careful. So I think we put together a pretty nice 4-day seminar that was substantially authentic, original Dr. Deming, mixed with some exercises and some other live presentations. That was donated to the Deming Institute, so I think it's still available from them for purchase. There's a facilitator guide as well with that if you want to try and do that. Guide yourself through the experience. So let's see, I was a GM for 7 years, and then GM was kind of moving on to other things and decided it was time to go find a new opportunity. Dick Steele, who was here yesterday, who started Beaker Services back in 1971. I knew Dick from outside GM, from a study group and some consulting work that I've done. And it just turned out that as I was looking to leave GM, he was looking to retire. So he says, "Hey, why don't you come and run this company?" Okay. So we had that was a very, very interesting transition. Maybe a different model than you might typically see. So we spent about 6 months with shadowing. And during that time frame, I spent part of the time with Dick, and then I spent at least half a day with every single employee in the company, doing whatever their job was, and just working together with them and having a conversation. So I got to know everybody in the company, and really got to understand the organization. And it's kind of a neat introduction. So the company's now 100% employee owned through an ESOP, and it's grown pretty well over the last few years. We just had our biggest year out of this last fiscal year, and we're taking on some pretty major, challenging, interesting projects. We just kicked off a project with a Brazilian company, Vale, a little 100,000 employee company. So they have a big decarbonization and they're interested in moving as much of their diesel fuel for the locomotives over to ammonia, so zero carbon fuel. So we have a project where we're buying a locomotive, ripping off all the engine controls, putting our own diesel engine control system on it, adding an ammonia fuel system to it with fuel blending, buying a flat car, building a locomotive tender, and ammonia gasification system, putting all the ammonia safety system stuff all over the locomotive, and trying to fit after treatment into the locomotive that's not designed to have after treatment. So, not bad for a company of 75 people. It would be kind of a big project for an OEM to take on. So this is probably going to be at least a couple of years working on this. New people coming into the organization with it, new constituents by it. So it's a fun place to work.
So I have a question based on what you just said. What you're talking about is major innovation, right? You have to innovate and invent everything along the way. You're creating something new. But do you think of innovation the way Deming taught it to be something always big, or is more innovation just process innovation all over the place? Like, what's innovation to any of you in a Deming world compared to how other companies, because you worked for other companies, do innovation?
I don't see it as limited. Some guy on the shop floor says, I got an idea on how to make my job easier. That's an innovation if we can implement it. But it could be something bigger. The bigger it is, the more you have to be concerned about doing things in a way where you're learning as you go rather than changing everything all at once, hoping it works out. That's a mistake we make sometimes.
But for training people, how is innovation with Deming different than innovations without?
The difference isn't the innovation. The difference is how you, in whatever you're doing, affect the organization as a whole. You're starting to look at something different. Most organizations I've seen, when they do something called innovation, they make one thing better and make 50 other things worse. Dr. Deming talked a lot about looking at systems. And one of my favorite things that I've heard about systems I got from Donella Meadows. She said, you can't understand systems, you can't control systems, but you can learn to dance with them. And that's a very Deming thing. It's not about controlling anything. You have no control, it's an illusion. But you can learn to dance with the system. And when you don't, you make one thing better and some other things worse. We have a great example of the Rocketdyne factory years and years ago. It had a disc that had 50, I think it was 40 blades that had to be welded onto it. So the disc had a little bit of variation in the diameters. The blades were different, a little bit different widths. They were supposed to be the same, but there's variation in everything. So the factory was putting a disc up there, and then they stacked the blades around, and there were supposed to be no gaps and no overlaps, and then they'd weld it. So they'd get up here, and there'd be some gaps, so they'd take a couple blades out, put different ones in. Pretty soon, no gaps, no overlaps, and they'd weld it up. Instituted continuous improvement and required every department to go do an improvement activity. So the blade guys got really serious about improving blades. And from their perspective, improving the blades is reducing the variation in the blades. So they did a really good job, got all the blades made so they were nearly the same size. Sent the first batch down to the shop floor. The guys are stacking up blades. There's a gap, so they start changing blades out. Since the blades are all the same size, there's always going to be a gap with those blades. They shut the factory down by making the blades better. Because they forgot that blade is not just a part. Bill is always reminding us that it's part of something, and if you don't consider the of, you're in a problem.
The requirement was 65.
It's plus or minus. I mean. That's also that's also interesting from a rocket engine perspective. This thing is supposed to be propelling fluid somewhere, and 60 plus or minus 5 blades. There's got to be a lot of variation in that system when you do that. But we got where we wanted to go, and not too many things blew up.
There's a sorry, difference.
Well, in the pharmaceutical domain, you're dealing with FDA in the US and other regulatory bodies in Europe and Brazil, for instance, and they come in to look at your organization, and you have to explain how you organize things and how you make a safe pharmaceutical product. And so basically what they're looking for is if this is a vial with a vaccine, they want to be sure that it is an active pharmaceutical ingredient that helps to cure the ailment. That's number one. Secondly, you do not want to introduce diverse effects. In other words, contraproductive interaction with other medications. So you have to really do clinical studies to show that it is safe to use. The third element is that when you have production batches that go out to distribution centers and to pharmacies, once you have detected the defective batch, then you have to identify all of the batches that are wrong, and you have to call them back and destroy them. And so what happens is that often enough you have during an inspection you could have a confrontation with the inspector because the inspector has a different meaning to your own meaning. innovation bit there is to collaborate with the inspectors and show them what you're doing based on which rationale. And then you get a good dialogue. And what happens then, rather than a confrontation, you get a convergence. And that working together with the inspectors is really fruitful. And I've witnessed this during my chairmanship of a quality group in the Netherlands of about 300 quality professionals. And we would have regular meetings. We would also invite inspectors to join the meetings. In the beginning, it was a bit difficult to get the conversation going, but after a while, we had really open discussions, and people were openly talking about their problems. And so there was all of a sudden we had a group that exchanged ideas, and so the convergence was really there. So that's a good development to see the collaboration with the inspectors.
I think there's kind of a provocative question, an interesting question. Innovation itself, I'm not sure, is different in a Deming organization than in a non-Deming organization. If by innovation you mean something new, novel, different, etc., I think that's common. The things that I think are different in he was quite particular about the use of continual improvement as opposed to continuous. And that goes back to the mathematical distinction between the terms continuous and continual. Continuous function is kind of a smooth function, and whereas he was quite adamant that improvement ought to be both kind of smooth like that, but also discontinuous in nature. So you have those step changes, which you could characterize as a form of innovation, but it's something that results from the application of new knowledge or new ideas in the improvement of a particular process or system. I think that's an area where there's he called out a distinction maybe, that he was very much about trying to include that in the idea of improvement. The other one, I think, we typically think about innovation.
Perfect.
Yes.
I think we very often think about innovation in terms of the products and services that a company delivers. And that's one area, I think, where there's a way innovation can happen in a Deming-focused organization that is less likely to happen in a non-Deming-focused organization. He was very particular about saying when you're trying to define the aim and purpose of the organization, you need to be defining that in terms of the underlying human need that you're serving as an organization. So, having worked at GM, for instance, GM said we're in the business of making great cars and trucks. That's not a Deming type purpose statement. That's a statement that not that they shouldn't be making great cars and trucks. Certainly should. And cars and trucks, what they're making at the moment, yes. But the people need cars and trucks. Right? That's not really what the human need is. The human need is for means of personal transportation. Then there's other quality characteristics that go along with that, prestige and all these other things. So if you said we're in the business of providing personal transportation with these kinds of quality characteristics, with how we go about doing that, then you see what business you might be in much more broad. you may still say, for now, it makes perfect sense for us to just be making cars and trucks because these are the core competencies. This is all what we're well able to do, and this is kind of where the market is right now. But do e-bikes fit that same need, right? Do passenger trains satisfy that same need? There's a much broader range of possibilities, and so if you're keeping your eye on the kind of technical landscape and the development of new ideas with personal transportation in mind, you're likely to come out or certainly consider different products or services for customers than you would have. He used examples like the abacus, and the slide rule, and the calculator. Very different technologies, right? They seem very different products, but the underlying human need for a convenient means of personal computation is the same underlying need for all of those. So if you're focused on that, you might make those technological transitions to the other. That was his focus. I would say, just from a personal viewpoint, if you're going from abacus to slide rule, that's one thing. If you're going from slide rule to a calculator, hugely different competency set for the organization. Right? So you might at that point say, maybe we want to switch the need that we're focused on. This is likely to get replaced. We've got precision woodworking and blah, 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 right? Well, what are other things that might fit? I don't think that was so much Dr. Deming's message, but I think it's a valid way for an organization to look at it. But I think there is innovation in that that's kind of different, maybe, than what a typical organization is.
Can you repeat your question? I just want to refresh.
Ian was telling the story of this amazing new innovation has to be done for this company in Brazil. And my question was, in a Deming world, is innovation in a Deming organization different than innovation in a non-Deming organization? And is all, in a Deming organization, would you consider innovation to be the big ta-da, we invented something new that goes out, or is innovation happening constantly on the process level?
Process of product.
It could be like Tim was saying, it'd just be somebody, making their tiny workflow better. Is that innovation, and how's that different?
That's innovation in a small bit. Yeah. So, I'm a retiree and a refugee from a classic red pen non-Deming company who had brief moments of blue pen behavior. So, innovation in our company meant that my company built primary flight control actuators using hydraulics technology for commercial and military aircraft. And our philosophy as far as product innovation goes is we have this thing that does something that the customer wanted 50 years ago. And we continue to improve on that. And anytime the company says we need, our customers say we need something, we're going to say, we're just going to take this thing and just make it better and try to shoehorn it into their application, into their needs. So that's not really innovation. What we're doing is, here's our thing. We do hydraulic actuators. We don't use electromechanical. Shade memory alloys or anything like that, just hydraulic actuation at 3,000 psi period. We're going to do it better, cheaper than anybody else. And when a customer says they want something, we're going to convince them that this thing is going to meet their needs. So innovation in a non-Deming company said, we're going to make things better, or what you say, we're going to have a factory be able to produce these things cheaper and faster. That's innovation. But that's good for the shareholders, but it's not necessarily good for the customer, because the customer says, well, we need something else to operate faster, more responsive. Well, no, you don't really need that, because we have this thing right there. We'll give it to you cheaper if you relax your requirements. That's That's not what the customers are asking for. Now, I think in a Deming organization, all the innovation is always driven by the customer wants. The customer says, we need something. And so it's up to us as product or service providers to come up with what meets that need. And our company, in brief moments of blue-penness, would actually look for a new technology out there that might be able to satisfy the need. I think for you, Ian, so Ian's company is a reseller and also a customer for a company I retired from. And some of the stuff that Ian's talking about, I think it involves some of the innovations that, the little brief moments. Some of the things that Ian needs to make his products more efficient is a better way to mix fuel products. So the environment, the regulatory agencies, and the customers are demanding of both Ian's company and my company, former company, refugee from higher efficiency, cleaner burning engines. And one of the things that was needed up to that, this classic carburation that had pretty good fuel air mixtures that made clean burning. But in order to get really clean burn, you have to kind of introduce the fuel air mixture into the cylinders. Correct me if I'm typing out a term, but to get better mixture, it's swirling, but they couldn't really do that. Now with 3D traditional machining processes, they couldn't do that. Okay? So 3D printing technology that allows you to do high temperature polymer metal, and that can actually make holes inside that can spiral around inside a piece of metal by actually building it up one way at a time. Right? With that technology, we're able to satisfy some of the needs that Ian's company has and his customers. So that's kind of an innovation that our company announced that we really know that if we can do this, we can satisfy the customer's needs. So that's kind of an innovation that's driven by the customer, and our company went out to look for the technology to satisfy that. So that's good innovation for that directly answers the customer. And I think Deming, the flow chart that Deming presented, customer, there's that little loop, right? That's what this company, that's what that division in our group was trying to do. Was okay, we have a technology that works, but you just need customers over here said, I need better efficiency. So this loop over here, listen to the customer, need more efficiency. We look for innovation either within the company itself or adjacent technology allows us to realize that. So that's innovation again. It's driven by the customer. A factory worker that says, hey, if you give me this jig, I can do my job better. That doesn't satisfy the customer's need other than maybe a lower price. It makes the shareholders happy with the fixed price contract, right? But real Deming innovation always starts at the customer. And you heard me yesterday say, your chart is missing one word. And that one word is
customer.
And in a Deming organization, I believe innovation has to be in the customer needs. Instead of in a red pen company, innovation is driven by how can we make this cheaper, faster, better, fewer quality benefits. But if the customers say, we don't want it cheaper, faster, we need something that's going to do something completely different. So that's how I vision innovation, Deming and non-Deming innovation.
Maybe can I just expand a little bit on that, because Yosh just reminded me of what I didn't say when I was saying the focus on need. One thing Dr. Deming used to say is, no customer asks for the electric light bulb. So now the customer had a need for a convenient form of illumination, right? But they had no idea of the technology being possible to produce an electric light bulb. People like Edison were working on developing that. You develop that with an understanding of that need, but it's not something the customer's going to ask for. They're delighted with it. That's certainly something that was core to what he was looking. And now, is that uniquely Deming? I think if you look at the Carnot model, for instance, the things that fall in the delighter category, those pretty much by definition are things that the customer didn't ask for, didn't expect when it's there. Like the first time there was a cup holder in the car, right? You're like, I didn't ask for that, but man, I've been carrying this thing between my legs. It never occurred to me that I should ask for a hole to put it in, right? That's brilliant. Now, if it's not there, you're like, why the hell isn't there a cup holder?
Now you have 10 of them, but you can't reach it.
Right. So, yeah.
I just have one comment, and I won't take any more time, but what you said about how your company made this product, and when people asked for something else, they would try and convince them, right, to use theirs, or that very little modification would work, right, within your range of abilities, right? I could argue that is a fantastic sales and marketing innovation. I realize it's not Deming, because if you were in a Deming world, that would not align with your aim or what you're doing, but it's still a widely used sales and marketing innovation. So,
and as long as nobody else figures out some other way to do it. For example, we're still using those actuators on the current space engine. Still, there are a lot simpler things we could be using.
I had a hand up.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up with what Frans said about innovation and compliance and regulatory controls. But I want to make two comments of the meeting. So one, I love what Mono said about his quote about making new products and trucks. He said, we don't make products and trucks. And it says people. And then if ever Simon's next travel line, it's a beautiful quote about not treating this as I work a lot with banks. I work with most of the banks. One of the problems with innovation is banks is you have these 6 regulatory bodies. And unlike pharma is incredibly advanced in terms of, like we talked about just the collaboration between certain inspectors and finding researchers. And they might be because they are researchers, I'm not sure. But in banks, you have the OCC, and it is very tight. So what you find is there's the Deming company. I would also say I don't think there's any such thing as because that's just such a growth. You take the 14,000. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is innovation can be heavily cycled regularly. And the problem is you have to have regular control. Bank can't lose record money. So there's an unbelievable friction between innovation, and that's what we struggle with in sort of software. I think we apply Deming's ideas or to almost a team in a place that's got these 5 regulatory controls. Anyone who take your banking actions to it. Just it's the hardest problem in innovation. Other problems.
you have to innovate at the regular stage.
I don't agree with that. I mean, the regular, that's a separate issue. We'll have a
Maybe it's right?
I don't agree that pharma has to right.
I think they have some we need to get conversations.
This group could turn The Sky is Blue into a 30-minute discussion. Guys, I want to try to take us down a different path. I'm hearing this that Ian and the rest can jump in if they so desire. Give me a couple seconds here. You talked about your company being ESOP, employee-owned. You mentioned a change from diesel to ammonia. Right? That is a huge paradigm shift that can imply a lot of risk to the employees that could struggle with what's this going to cost me in the end. You're changing production safety processes and in-service safety processes, changing manufacturing techniques, maybe not so much assembly techniques. How do you manage the fear-risk balance to the 75 people that could see this not working?
good question. So we have a pretty open culture in the organization. We have a monthly all-employee meeting where we just talk about all the different things that are going on. So people are participating in that and certainly have an opportunity to express their concerns and so on over time. This is not. This project is kind of an add-on project as opposed to replace the traditional business project. So it's not, hey, my job's going to be going away, or my job's going to change drastically to do this. So I don't think it doesn't have some of those kind of risk characteristics. On the other side of that, though, is the established business. If we just keep going, doing what we're doing, does have the potential to go away for a variety of different reasons, and people are aware of the risks as far as that's concerned too. Since about 2000, we've had a bit of a diversification effort going on in the company. So much of this what we call the system integration business, which is the application of custom control systems to industrial power equipment. That's that and the distribution of those controls products and associated instrumentation is really kind of a new businesses for us. And there were certainly some real tensions around that whole growth and the resource allocations during that time period. But prior to that time period, we were heavily dependent on the rebuild activity for the locomotive market. What happens in the locomotive market is as the economy slows down and goods shipment starts to decline. They have a high fixed cost, high capital asset business, so they don't get rid of those assets and shrink and grow their fleets and so on. They park equipment, park locomotives and so on that they don't need. And if they break a locomotive, so, well, we've got one that we parked, so pull this out, put the broken locomotive there until business starts picking back up again. So their overhaul programs drop off much more drastically than the transportation of goods drops off, and then when things come back, it comes back up much more soon. So we had, as a company, kind of prior to that point in time, we had two fairly major layoff events when we went through one of those drastic cycles. And that was part of the motivation for the diversification effort, was to not be so dependent on that business cycle industry. Since then, we haven't had any major layoff events like that, because we're able to flex and just have other parts of the business support whichever piece of the business isn't going to work out. So we do have that kind of an environment where it's that's the case. We have a long-term employee-owned company. We have a strong focus on people development, and in fact, one of our core values, something that's really fundamental to the organization, and in many ways what we regard the business's need therefore, is to provide an ongoing opportunity for professional development. In some ways that's more fundamental than what we do as a company. So I know that's not a very normal way to look at things, but it is kind of part that feeds. Are people going to be as anxious in that context as they would be in an environment where they have a narrow production line focused skill, and you have layoff. You don't really have it for the long term.
Well, I commend the small company to look at such a dramatic change in the type of fuel. Right? We talked about innovation in the first question. We go from oil-based, crude oil-based fuel systems, and we looked to replace the fuel with plant-based or biological fuels and alternative fuels. Ammonia isn't normally on the top of that list.
Right. So we're not.
So that's a big.
It is
adjustment, and it's great.
I'm happy to talk more about it. We're not making.
No.
We do have other things that we've done that are related in nature, to where this isn't just 100%.
Thank you for helping this.
Wow. We only hear a half a day?
I know. Nearly a week. So thank you for being on the panel. You don't have to go.
You should mention the loop. Yeah. I don't know if that's 1950, but eventually Deming has interstate zero, maybe far lower. That is, you can continuously improve that. There's always the opportunity to stop and change technologies, which means you start from scratch. And so what happens is a company known as Pratt & Whitney that's building rotary piston engines is not going to kill the golden goose, so they'll get beat to market by a jet engine company or a mimeograph company will get beat by Xerox. But Avon, when he came here, spoke about a telephone company that essentially went to stage zero and said, we're going to start from scratch. And came up with the dial-up phone, which doesn't have a rotor. Right. And in a non-Deming company, the rotary dial people would have a fit with that.
It just makes it go faster back to home.
So the idea is what's in the new economics is there are opportunities to either go around and round or just stop. Start from zero.
But putting what the ES company is doing is they do see they're transitioning into that day zero kind of mindset with alternate fuels, right? But they're not going to kill the golden goose, but they're wedging in.
Well, that's what they're doing. Yeah. But otherwise,
but that
comes from someplace else.
But that wedging is still driven by either the customer or regulatory requirements that are coming down the road. And so there's the two sides. You're going to squeeze a golden goose until you can't squeeze it anymore and then shut everything down and go home. Or just gradually transition. But sooner or later, your company's going to lose the product.
Some of what Deming is talking about is captured by you can be really good at manufacturing buggy whips and become the best to lowest cost buggy whip manufacturer in the world. But his definition of quality says your product has to enjoy a sustainable market. So if you're not looking at that sustainability in the marketplace, whatever innovations you do is going to put you in a position where you got a really great product that nobody wants.
Even if the company in the States spends a lot of money on controlling regulation to keep that business sustainable, as long as the Europeans don't follow that, we have an issue. So you just...
Clayton Christensen has a series of books on disruptive innovation, and which are really excellent series of books that I recommend highly. This is a difficult problem that organizations really struggle with because, as he describes it in there, when you become kind of the dominant player in an existing market, the best buggy whip manufacturer, you have scale production systems all organized around buggy whip manufacture at scale, and doing that as efficiently as possible. So you're trying to embed as much of your knowledge, capability, and so on in processes as equipment, and people are kind of cogs and doing the same thing repetitively in the system. You go to an innovation, and how you evaluate business cases and all of that kind of stuff is based upon scale economics. The disruptive innovation for a new market requires very high levels of human adaptability, very human dependent, completely different kind of a culture for the organization, a different way in which you evaluate projects, all these things that are different, and it's a different kind of company. So how do you do that? Do you try and do that within the existing systems where you're fighting against the way everything's done? Or do you kind of break it off to the side and do a Saturn, right? Create this completely different thing?
I've just been thinking about Saturn the whole time. I was like,
Right?
what happened? Why did Saturn happen, and what happened to Saturn?
So Saturn on its own was it wasn't a success from the standpoint of how much did it cost and how much revenue did it produce. But in terms of the brand it built and the products and all that kind of stuff, it was a great success. When it came to be folded back into GM's existing cultural immune system killed it. Right?
It's like a black hole.
It's like the Borg. Just took it out. So those people with all those values and capabilities and so on, they integrated back into the organization. They were still there. But what GM had paid to create was mainly destroyed. So that's
Saturn anymore.
But I think that's and I'm not meaning to be critical of GM in particular. I think that's a challenge any organization is going to have. You create this innovative thing out to the side. Now, how do you reintegrate? How do you make the rest of the organization like that, or how do you maintain it, reintegrate it? If it's just kind of off to the side and it's all really different like this, and you've got the people that have to operate in a completely different environment, like looking up at the fence and saying, "This is some bullshit. These guys get to do all this stuff, right?" These are real challenges for just managers.
But there's an economic friction against what we call big eye innovation too. Like there's an economic reality to a lot of organizations that makes big eye innovation difficult, right? Like, at the studios, they recognized early on that direct to consumer was the way to go, right? But their economic model is that they sell their content to 13 people. We call them MSOs. It's 13 people. They can't go to the board and say, "Hey, we're gonna piss off these people and break our model and lose you $40 billion a year on HBO, but don't worry about it because we're gonna go direct to consumer and in like 10 years we're gonna make 80 billion because the board's gonna say that's an amazing idea. Tell the next CEO that." we'd like to meet with him as soon as possible, right? So they had to do this really slow seduction, right? Like, and HBO cracked the code. Nobody could crack it. HBO cracked the code. They figured, we'll do this HBO Now thing, and we'll go through the MSOs, but we'll start introducing our brand directly to the consumer. Then we'll do this, and then by the time this a la carte whole thing really broke, HBO's over this. They just kept rebranding. That's why you wonder, like, why is HBO Now and HBO Go? And because every time they do these rebrandings, they're changing their business model a little bit. And now they go directly to the consumer, right? But that was like a 10-year arc. More than that, it was like a 13, 14-year arc. Because that innovation was just... Now, new entrants to the marketplace, they don't have to worry about that. Like YouTube just gets to go, "Hey, we're here. Use us," right? So I think with big companies especially... So I've built innovation labs for some big companies and been part of them. And the economic realities is what always kills them. We always break it up. Little eye innovation, big eye innovation. Little eye innovation is all that fun stuff. Big eye innovation is like, let's design our whole business model so now we're going direct to consumer, which is huge. But I think what's interesting to me is how do we figure out how to solve that friction between that conflict between the economic reality and what HBO did.
So beautiful. I would love to take this energy and this focus on innovation and take it into our next activity, which is talking about where do we take the In2 network. And I've got 3 building questions that I want to take the group through and have your innovative thinking come together about, where do we take this group from here forward? What do we want to do? So is there anything that you need from the panel or to kind of close this conversation before we move into that?